Let's talk about negotiating the franchise agreement with your franchisor. In general, the franchisor is not going to want to negotiate any of the provisions in the franchise agreement. That being said, there are some times and circumstances where the franchisee can negotiate certain provisions. The ability to negotiate with the franchisor is going to depend on the context of who the franchisee is and who the franchisor is. If the franchisor is mature, large, has an established franchisee system, they're going to be generally disinclined to negotiate any terms. However, if the franchisor is new, they may be willing to negotiate on more aspects of the agreement because they are interested in finding franchisees. The franchisee as well will have an ability to influence the negotiation depending on what type of entity that they are. If the franchisee is a large, experienced operator that has a lot of assets and cash behind them and is going to expand the system substantially, the franchisor might be willing to negotiate on some substantive points. However, if you're a first-time franchisee, the franchisor generally is not going to be as inclined to negotiate with you. That being said, those are generalities. Fundamentally, when you're investigating a franchise and talking to the franchisor, from the get-go, you should ask whether or not there is room for negotiation on certain terms. And the franchisor will generally talk to you and engage in a discussion on this point. But if the answer is a flat-out no, then you may not want to spend your time spinning your wheels or spending your money on your attorney just to, again, be told no. In terms of what can be negotiated in a franchise agreement, there are some commonalities. Fees generally are not negotiable. However, franchisees might be successful in asking for a temporary reduction in advertising or royalty fees in the first few months of operation. The franchisee might also be able to negotiate a reduced franchise fee to buy into the system if they're buying multiple locations. Territory is a very important aspect for a franchisee to understand, and franchisors can negotiate on these points. Franchisee might want to look for exclusive territory language if it's not in there already, or may want to have right of first refusal on adjoining territories. Franchisors tend to be willing to at least discuss or negotiate these points. Some other things that might get negotiated are termination clause provisions, what the measure of damages will be in a suit, if should the venture go south. Sometimes franchisors might be willing to negotiate walkaway fees for the franchise. That means if, based on certain metrics, the franchise has gone south in negative cash flow, for instance, for a certain amount of time, let's say 2 years, the franchisee might be able to simply walk away without damages based on that provision. Franchisor might be willing sometimes to talk about that type of clause. Another thing that's often discussed and negotiated is the personal guarantee. The personal guarantee is very common with franchise agreements these days. However, they can be open to some negotiation. A franchisee might ask to be released after a certain amount of years, or have some sort of cap on damages, or some iteration of that where there's a reduction in their overall liability depending on metrics or milestones. So in sum, it's important that you understand how willing your franchisor is going to be open to negotiating the agreement, and then you should have realistic expectations about where the points of negotiation can happen. You are not going to be able to negotiate every clause. However, there are some ways where you can reduce your risk and have a better situation going forward in the system.